Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we're going to talk about Climax.
Yes.
The new film from Gaspar Noé.
Yes.
Which I didn't even know he was making a new film. First I'd heard of it was basically today when you told me it was on.
I knew he'd done one, but I only recently found out that it was playing in Birmingham, that it was only playing for a few days. It's coming again, if you've missed it at the Electric, it's playing again at the Midlands Arts Centre.
November the 15th.
November the 15th, yes.
It's a kind of a horror, trippy, but not maybe in the way you might expect from him if you've seen like Enter the Void. You know, it's not. I was expecting kind of psychedelia from it, which is not what it is. But there is a kind of trippiness to it. And it's about dance and music, and kind of youth and sex and violence and all the things that he's really interested in. It stars Sofia Boutella, primarily.
My love.
Who's wonderful. We saw her in Hotel Artemis
Recently, but I've seen her in
great.
a whole bunch of things, actually. She's my favorite actress of the moment, I think.
But to say it stars her is, you know, I mean,
She's one of the people in the film.
Yeah, it's an ensemble piece, but she's the one you might recognise. I don't know that you know any of the others.
She's the only name I recognise anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if the others might be...
French stars.
Well, no, I was going to say, I think there might really be dancers who have been chosen for their ability to dance and then used as actors. Do you know what I mean?
That could be.
But I don't know.
So I've seen her in Kingsman: Secret Service, which was fantastic.
Yeah, she's good in
that. In Star Trek Beyond, in The Mummy, which I loved, and Charlize Theron with Charlize Theron in Atomic Blonde. So actually, you know, I've seen her in at least like 5 films in the last couple of years. And, you know, she's really a fantastic presence on film. She's always kind of slightly odd, you know. She always plays a villainous character, or mostly plays a villainous character, somebody with an edge, somebody who could do you harm, whilst looking very sleek and, you know, beautiful is the wrong word, but feline, yeah. She's very sexy, yeah.
Yeah. It's not quite the case in this that you suspect that she might do someone harm, but she's got certainly strength to her. She's constantly kind of putting off the advances of this slaggy guy who claims to have had sex with her and wants to again or for the first time. It's not clear. The kind of one-line pitch for this film. Actually, this is what I told Matt earlier, and he was like, "That's exactly a Gaspar Noé film." Is there's a party happening and someone has spiked the sangria.
Yes.
Like, in one line, you kind of get an image of what this film is going to be. And it doesn't quite add up to what you think. Like I say, I was expecting psychedelia out of that, psychedelic kind of imagery, like I'd seen in Enter the Void, which is not what you get here. But nonetheless, there's a kind of, there's a spiralling psychosis that happens. And
the imagery is very much like...
Irreversible.
Irreversible, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's much more like that than it is Enter the Void. But that is, without spoilers, that is the kind of very basic idea of the film. We can't really say much more without going into details because everything is tied up in how images are conveyed and exactly what you're seeing, and so I don't really want to say anything else before we get into spoiler territory.
Okay.
So now spoilers.
Okay.
It's about a group of dancers who have only recently really got to know each other. The film opens on their kind of audition tapes, talking to the camera and talking to a couple of interviewers about you know, what it's right like the start of Cold War, you know, why they want to join this it's like a troop, why they want to dance and where they come from and what do they want to do with their lives, and you kind of hear the desires and the hopes and the dreams and the backgrounds of these various people.
There's a little bit more than that. So just visually, what you're seeing is this TV surrounded by videos and books, right? And the books include, like, you know, Buñuel's autobiography, the films of Suspiria, and so kind of, you know, the books and
certainly the films suggest a kind of headspacey, trippy aspect.
Horror-y, so, and the questions that are asked are also, I think, very telling. So, you know, why, or, you know, how far would you be prepared to go, right? Yes. I think there's something kind of pointed about it, really. It sets up a kind of a thing. So on the one hand, they're dancers, they're people who are working with their bodies. You get a little bit of their history, right? Are your parents supportive or are they not supportive? Yeah. And also this thing of, what do they dance? How far are they prepared to go? And, kind of what is their dream in a way, right? So I thought that was all kind of very interesting. And the people that you see in the interview are the people that you then see, giving this performance. Right?
Yeah. So these are the people who've become part of this troupe. So the film opens directly on this image of it's a white screen. And you realise it's snow as this girl staggers, kind of down into the frame, and she's clutching her stomach. And this is the girl who is later on in the film stabbed herself.
Okay, right. Then we get this television amidst these books and videos, because many of them look VHSs.
Well, the film tells you it's based on a true story from 1996. So I think it's also setting itself around then too, which is why this is all VHS and a full frame screen.
Okay, how interesting! I didn't get that.
Yeah.
I didn't get the period. So that's interesting. I wonder what the significance of the period is.
I don't know, because it says at the start, this is one of the things with Noé and his use of credits. In Irreversible, the whole thing in that film was it's backwards, and the film starts off with the closing credits. And
in this film, it starts off.
In this film, it starts off with that, except they're scrolling the right way, but you think, oh, is he doing it backwards again? Because clearly, whatever's happened to this girl has happened.
Yes.
Like you're going to see what has happened.
Yes.
And then the film, the text that comes up says, the film you have just seen was based on a true story from 1996. So you kind of think, oh, is he doing it backwards? And it turns out he's not. That is that's a flash forward, as it were, from the end of the film. But he does all the credits. But I like that thing about him. I like that he goes, like, people don't like to sit through credits. So what I'll do is I'll make them sit through the credits at the start.
Yeah.
Everyone can get their due who worked on the film.
Well, there's more than that, actually. And all of that stuff was very interesting. Because at the end, when the lights just went off, people didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right? So he's getting interesting effects out of doing the unexpected, really.
Yeah.
So, and one of the unexpected things is that the film begins and you have like this multiracial dancers, doing in a way what musicals are meant to do, which they're dancing in sync, and they're all kind of creating patterns with each other, and there's a real sense of community and feel good and kind of energy and so on. And then something like a title comes out again, and it says, this is a French film, and proud of it, and proud of being so.
And that's right after the TV has shown you these interviews. So the TV shows the interviews, and then you get some opening credits, as I recall, and then it shows you the French flag, which has been made. It's the kind of backdrop in this sort of community centre. But it shows you that, and it says this is a French film and proud.
Yes.
There's a lot of that.
So basically, there's about, I don't know how long it is, but it feels like around 10 minutes or so, which is, this dance number, right? Or actually, it's almost like 3 little dance numbers, right? Interspersed. And those are all like, kind of wonderfully choreographed, and it's a collective experience, and it's filmed in all kinds of ways you can imagine, including, for a very long time with a directly overhead camera, which I found annoying at some point.
I quite enjoyed that. I think there was interesting imagery and interesting feeling to the way that people moved, the way that their limbs would protrude, move back in, the way that they would kind of they turn themselves horizontal and lie on the floor and move and then be vertical again. Their shapes changed in interesting ways.
I like that about it, but what I didn't like is that there seemed to be like, an entire sequence or a really long take of dancing shown one way, and then there would be an incredibly long sequence where it would all be shown overhead.
Yeah.
Right. So I just think kind of somebody more imaginative with dance and movement or whatever would have allowed us to see what we wanted to see without all the middling bits in between, which just kind of seemed ineffectual.
I mean, I think the scene you're thinking of is the one that I mentioned as the kind of mosh pit scene, where they're in a circle, the dancers are in a circle, and then they take their turns in the middle to perform. And that's not, as I recall, done in a single take. It is cut.
Okay, well then, you may be right.
It may go on for a bit, and it may be, if it doesn't start being interesting to you, it may never become interesting.
Well, my thinking around that is that it stayed too long.
Yeah.
There are too, so there were interesting things within that, but this was shot directly overhead, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of, people were plastered onto the floor, and they weren't always on the floor making an image or a movement with their body. I mean, sometimes they were just, dancing vertically normally, but you were just seeing them.
Yeah.
And I just kind of thought that I would have cut more of that.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think it stays probably a little bit too long, but I think it was nonetheless an interesting kind of and lively sort of way of looking at the dancers. And there is something in the film. I think there's a visual motif of circles going on in the film as well, and that kind of builds one. Like when the trip really starts and the kind of descent into hell starts. It starts off with this shot of a cup of sangria that's again directly overhead, and it's this circle in the centre of the frame. And there's also a thing of the camera rotating a lot, which again he was doing in Irreversible. There's that shot right at the end of Irreversible where the camera spins and spins and spins, and it's like time going backwards or whatever it might be, and it becomes quite abstract. And there are elements of that in this. The camera will rotate, creates a circle in doing so, and there does seem to be a motif of kind of circles or revolution or rotation or disorientation. I don't know. I have to watch it again. I think that first dance scene, the one that's shown in that long take, it's one of the best dance scenes you might ever see. Like in terms of the thrill of watching people move in talented and interesting and choreographed ways. It's fantastic. I'm not not necessarily to say it's on like the same cinematic level as like a Busby Berkeley or something. Like it's letting the people do their thing without very much interference from the camera.
You can see people's bodies in motion, and they're beautiful. And actually in that scene they're beautiful. And actually one of the fascinating things about the film later on is that, when they take the spiked sangria and everything begins to dissolve and become hellish and so on, a lot of those emotions of what hell or suffering or pain or losing your mind might look like is actually conveyed through dance.
They keep moving.
Yeah, they keep moving
all
dancing.
night long, to the point where even in the morning after there's still someone moving.
Yes, and their bodies are filmed dancing those.
Yeah.
So I
and
thought
actually it has that feeling of like in those sort of Hieronymus Bosch or something, those paintings of hell from hundreds of years ago, of like people in sort of, whether it's pain or whatever, but they're in these kind of physical sort of contortions, and they look like dancing as well in those. Yes. It has that feeling.
Yeah.
Like this, and the way people dance as well, I think, speaks to kind of who they are. There are people that dance in a reserved way, and there are people that dance with it's a lot of energy in their arms, and there are people that dance with the kind of all over body movement, and in a way it sort of speaks to who they are. There's one point in particular where it's when there's a circle of dancers and it's filmed from above, and various people are taking their turns, and the one, like the big black fella he was talking in the interview about. They asked him, what's the worst thing you've ever done in a fight? He said, I smashed someone's skull and broke their teeth. Right? That kind of, although he's not really seen as violent in the rest of the film, it kind of comes out then, like that dance area turns into like a mosh pit briefly while he's in there. He doesn't want to dance at first, right? They push him into it, and he's like, I don't want to dance. And then he just lets loose, and it becomes really, really aggressive for a minute. And a couple of other guys join in as well. And it's like there's this visceral expression in that moment.
It seemed interesting to me that there were many, many references through the dancing, not through the music, to voguing, and Madonna, and what's the film? Paris is Burning. Right. So that type of, subcultural, marginalized, outsider, American underclass dancing, right? And the hip hop is part of that, but also the whole other gay subcultural thing of drag queens and houses and voguing is also kind of conveyed through the dancing, and it's just interesting. And also, there's a dream of America in the film, isn't there? Yeah.
Yes.
So so all of that hip hop culture and certainly the dance moves and that all seems like an American cultural imperialism, really, you know. Yeah, and there is that, yeah. So anyway, I was trying to connect, this idea of, Europe on the one hand, France on the other, yeah, the flag, and this is a French film, I'm proud of it, and so on, and then kind of, the effects of like this dream of America that for this generation is kind of inspired by hip hop music and hip hop culture, because one of the characters says America's a dream, is a paradise for black people, or something like that. Again, kind of interesting things to kind of try and kind of see if there are connections, right? There are conscious connections that one can kind of bring up. Anyway, that's all wonderful, and you begin to learn a little bit about these characters, but basically, as soon as the rehearsal stops, they have a party, right? And, as the party begins, you get like really these comic skits, with one guy saying how many women he's had, and, kind of, these two other guys talking, very funnily.
People are chatting in pairs.
Yeah, in pairs. And
the camera cuts between them.
Yeah, so you cut from conversation to conversation to conversation, and, and actually it feels very disorientating, because, you don't know who, you get no sense of the space in a way, where it's cutting to and from, and who's overhearing and who's not, and what the groupings are. They feel almost like isolated, really.
I was going to say, there's a kind of vignette-y feeling to that, and I think one of the things that's really subtle about it, it's not so subtle, but it has a big effect, is that the camera doesn't cut directly between these conversations.
Yes.
The cuts they have like 4 or 5 just frames of black between. It's like blinking. I think he did the same thing in Enter the Void, where it was this guy, this kind of it was about the Book of the Dead, that film, like the guy dies and then his kind of ethereal being looks over the entire world of Tokyo and all his friends and family and stuff. And there are times in that film where there are these cuts that happen across space and time, but they happen with these black frames in the middle that break it up somehow, that make it like you're changing worlds or something like that. It's really weird. And so instead of it being this continuous cut, as it were, that goes from one place to another directly in this film, these little borders that break up the cuts have the effect of kind of separating these short snippets of conversation into these kind of vignettes, these parcels. They kind of dislocate them from space and time in a way.
Yes.
So it's not like just cross-cutting.
Yes, it's
dislocated.
It is, well, and it feels kind of, it's very, very charming, I found, actually. But it does feel it felt slightly odd. I kind of, I couldn't quite put my finger on why. So, what you're saying might have something to do with it. I also thought that, not anchoring the scene in any kind of visual geography that you could then connect the other bits to, kind of made it feel slightly...
These are just 2 shots.
Yeah.
You get some sense, like people will kind of look over their shoulder at someone else they're clearly talking about, but the scene is not about giving you a sense of the space at all.
Yes. So anyway, that kind of works. I mean, that works at kind of familiarizing yourself with all of these disparate people. And I think basically kind of, what happens is that as the party progresses, things begin to go wrong, basically. So, what had been a kind of, this idea of an ideal multicultural France, where actually kind of, not only multicultural, but also multiracial. Right, so there's people from Germany and so on, but also there's Algerian immigrants and African immigrants living in France and so on, right? And you get this idea of, this is contemporary France and it's multiracial and multicultural. Anyway, and then the Kool-Aid gets spiked, or the sangria gets spiked, right? And then everything begins to go wrong, and basically what happens is, you're back in a Gaspar Noé hell, and you say, why do I bother with his films? They're going to be like this, right? And they really are kind of so unpleasant to sit through. You think, why is he showing you this? What view of the world, does this guy have? What is he trying to accomplish by kind of showing you these things, really?
Well, I mean, I didn't have that reaction. I didn't have the reaction of hating it, if that's what you did.
No, I didn't. No, hated is too strong. But I did think, like some things, like the kick in the pregnant woman's stomach.
Yeah, you had a little odd scream at that.
Yes, I did. I mean, why do you need to do that? Why can't you present a vision of hell without, showing, without that, really?
Well, because I guess that kind of death and violence to that extreme is, what would hell be without it? I agree, it's harsh as hell, but I mean, harsh as hell, harsh as fuck. But, it reminded me of Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee, which was, if you remember that film, was it's kind of plotless, right? It's about the kind of one day. That film was about one day in New York, is it Brooklyn? It must be.
Yes, it was Brooklyn.
Where these various characters are interacting in their daily lives, walking around, talking to each other, interacting, and the characters kind of, clashing and whatever it is. And the heat, there's a heat wave, and the day builds up and builds up, these tensions grow and grow and grow, and eventually it explode into violence. Now it's not quite the same. I don't think the tensions raise as much, and obviously there is this direct impact on what's happening, which is the LSD and the sangria that everyone's drunk without realising it. But I think the effect is intended to be kind of similar. The way that things can bubble over and explode. I think probably to less of a kind of useful or meaningful end in this. It feels like it's saying less.
I know, but
for effect.
What I mean by Gaspar Noé's particular hell is, Gaspar Noé doesn't seem to ever conceptualize or conceive that actually you could have a good trip. So I mean, here are all these people with the sangria that's spiked. You think at least for half of them, it should have turned out great. They should have lost their inhibitions and fucked whoever they wanted that they would have been afraid to before. But it's all like, everybody goes through hell.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. I mean, you do see some people getting off, but there is the animation. There's a kind of animating factor of. Someone has spiked the sangria, and immediately there's a kind of witch hunt about it.
Community dissolves at that point, right?
Yeah.
So,
and that's right at the start of the trip, really.
Yeah. So immediately after the dance sequences, all that was conveyed by those dance sequences falls apart. People begin to blame each other. They're basically, the first guy who didn't drink the sangria because he's a Muslim, basically. He gets lynched, basically, and he gets kicked out of the group because they imagine that he must have done it. And then they find another scapegoat, and then another scapegoat, and then another scapegoat. And each of the scapegoats is more and more violent, really. Really, yeah?
Yeah, it's the woman who runs the thing at the start who made the sangria.
Yes.
And they blame her. And then she says, well, I drank it too.
Yes.
And so it becomes this right, it's got to be someone who didn't drink the sangria.
That's right.
And so then they pick on Omar, who's the Muslim guy, and kick him out. And then when they find out that the girl, that she's pregnant because she's confided in someone. So that she's not making it up because she really means it. And so she's confided in the Sofia Boutella character. And then this other girl comes in and says, what, you didn't drink?
Yes.
And then the other blabs she's pregnant, and then she takes it as a lie. You're lying, you're not pregnant, you're making that up.
Yes.
And kicks her in the stomach, and it's a very it's not an accident, she kicks her in the stomach, it's targeted.
I thought that was gratuitous.
Yeah, probably is.
I mean, it's, it's difficult to talk of gratuitousness in a film like this, but I did think that drew a line because, I do think that there is something about mothers in this, right? Because a main strand of it is also like this woman who's clearly been a bad mother and, who's kind of trying to make it up with her son, who's clearly living with a stepmother. And, the son is at the party and it's a baby, 4 or 5 or something like that. And then she locks up the baby for his own protection. And then actually she loses the key. So, even her best attempts at being a good mother are like she's a terrible mother. And she ends up killing herself or whatever. So,
the child has died. Is what we are led to believe, because it starts off with she locks him in the electricity sort of closet, saying, stay in here, it's for your own good, because everyone out there is going mental.
Yes.
If you touch this, by the way, you'll die.
I know.
And so one thing leads to another, and then as the lights turn off towards the end of the film, everyone's like, oh, the baby died, or the kid died. It's not a baby, but...
I didn't get that. I thought she had died.
She then kills herself.
Yes.
Because she's like, oh, I've killed my son.
Yeah, but you never see the child.
You don't. So the film has got a line.
Yeah, so there might be some hope.
No dead toddlers.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a filmmaker who makes me wince, really. And I do wonder, like, why I keep going to see his films. Yeah, kind of, what do you learn from it, or what experience do you get from it? That you feel you must go and see them, because, actually, certainly his experimentations with form here, I think are, I don't think they're anything special, really. We've come to expect them from him.
Well, these are things he has done before.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
I mean, there was one thing...
originality.
One thing that I saw that I hadn't noticed before, and that I found quite beautiful, was at the very end when the police come in, and actually I imagine it's been shot normally, but it's been printed upside down.
Or he may just have held the camera upside down.
Or he might have held the camera upside down. But anyway, it's the same effect. And there's something almost ethereal or magical where people look like they're hanging from the ceiling. I don't know. I wonder if there's more than just actually showing the film upside down, because it's a very eerie experience. It kind of has an eeriness to it. But actually, I found quite beautiful. It really makes you look at the space.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think just before that, when the kind of final orgy / sort of violence scene, the climax, as it were, is shown in the same way, but that's all much more close up and much more aggressively. Yes. So you don't get a kind of sense of beauty, really. But nonetheless,
actually, you see very little. It's just like
it does. It starts to really chop things up. But still, it's you do get a feeling of that. You're looking at these people on the ceiling as opposed to on the ground, and there's something. It's a more interesting experience than it would be if you were being shown them the right way up, which is not saying much, I suppose, but it is an interesting image.
It has a really interesting effect, that hanging from the ceiling. It just did, so there were, my initial view was you see somebody it looks like they're hanging from the ceiling.
There's one person still dancing.
Yeah. And you think, oh, how do they do that? Are they clutching their feet? And then you notice, that the policemen coming in are also upside down, but it's very eerie and kind of magical, and you feel you're watching something with fresh eyes, but obviously trying to replicate that sense of feeling high and woozy and slightly drugged, right? I mean, I think there is an attempt in the film to reproduce that feeling,
and I suppose there's a sense of how the night, because it's set over this one night, and that night has been a transformation.
Yes.
And the transformation goes as far as turning the image upside down.
Yes.
The film kind of threatens to do that at one or two points with the camera rotating, does a barrel roll a couple of times, but ends up the right way up usually.
Yes.
But it's at the end that it turns up and stays upside down.
Yes.
And that's where everything has kind of changed. And as you said, it becomes kind of beautiful in a way, the camera, because the camera's been going so crazy during the course of the night. Towards the end, it goes insane, as you say, and then when you come back in the morning and the door opens up, it's on a tripod, or at least it's perfectly still. I don't know if it then moves again. I can't remember, but it's even though it's upside down, the shot is centered on the door in the corner and the light streaming in, and so there's composure and beauty in that shot. It's not just about being crazy as it was the night before.
So what do you think Gaspar Noé is trying to convey? What are his themes?
Well, I think there has to be something. This is, again, while I was thinking about Do the Right Thing, there is something about the kind of racial makeup of the group, and the breakdown of, as you pointed out, this kind of ideal sort of... I don't think... It's never made explicit that we're getting together a group of people from different races and backgrounds, but that's clearly the implication, I think.
Yes. But actually, there's something very interesting about it, because there is a villain to this piece.
Yeah.
Right? So, during the interviews, there's this, German woman who says, the culture and so on there is wonderful, but, there was just too many drugs, and people are even putting LSD in their eyelids now, and I just have to get away from that.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that at the end of the film, she's the one who's kind of
she's the one who is actually, turns out she didn't get away from it at all, and she is putting LSD in her eyes.
Yeah, so she's, so she spiked the sangria. So actually, it's very significant that this kind of blonde Aryan goddess, who is really like, this blonde Amazon. She's, one of the tallest people in the group, and she's the whitest person and the blondest person in the group. It is kind of interesting that she's the one who is kind of,
Go on.
Well, because, Germany is the leading power in Europe. It is kind of the central economy. It's got kind of great power. Berlin, I think, is the cultural capital of Europe. It's not London. Right. So, I think it would be interesting to make that a villain in, this piece, something that destroys this multicultural, multiracial ideal of France.
Mm. There are things about the film that feel cheap.
Like?
Well, I would start with actually the books and DVDs, the books and videos on each side of the telly in that opening sequence.
Uh-huh.
I think they're not really. It's like name dropping. Like, this film's going to be like Eraserhead. This film's going to be like Suspiria. This film's going to be like Schizophrenia. Like,
well, no, because there's too much around it. I just thought that was interesting. He is framing the film for us. He is providing like a kind of a visual and thematic context. So, for example, it also, I thought, the Buñuel's autobiography was the book that was closest on the bottom shelf on the left to the screen. And I thought it was interesting because, he made this film in 1960, which I can't remember the name of now, but it's this Mexican film where, everybody goes to a party in one room and then they can't get out.
Okay.
Right. And, this had a little bit like this.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. It's like
kind of
sort of thing.
Yeah. So they can't escape this hell, that they find themselves in. And it made me wonder if actually all of the other references that surround that screen of interviews, if they're not kind of woven through in some manner of reference.
Yeah, I suppose, and they may be. But nonetheless, it's still building a film out of references, if that is what the kind of idea is a bit empty, isn't it?
It doesn't need to be.
But do you think it
could be?
Well, yeah, it could.
So we talked about Buñuel's Exterminating Angel, but another kind of clear reference point is Pasolini's Salò.
Yeah, which is referenced in the videotapes on the side of the screen.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
But I think, my argument against... When I saw Salò, and actually I had one moment where I was literally ill. I had to get out of the cinema, and then I was sick, and then I went back in to watch the end of it. But it kind of, when we got to... It was the circle of blood, I think, that, made me run out and vomit. So, this has a little bit of that feel about it as well, actually. And again, my criticisms of this film would be the same as that of Salò. In order to make a critique of fascism, do you have to kind of show, those extreme actions in kind of in such a brutal way? And again, that would be kind of my reservation or response to Gaspar Noé. Yeah, kind of, do you actually need to kick a pregnant woman in the stomach in order to make, and make the audience wince as it does, in order to make whatever point you're trying to make?
Your vision of hell.
Yes.
I mean, I suppose the counter argument, or a counter argument, could be to Salò. This is to your argument about Salò is that if you're doing this through kind of metaphor on screen, like showing something that visually appalling, is kind of the only way to really express your kind of hatred of the evils of fascism, as opposed to making like a thesis or something like that. The kind of visceral ugliness of it is that's the power of cinema, isn't it? That's why you would use a cinematic medium.
It's true, and I mean, I think there's another thing, which is, we now see almost on a daily basis many worse things
than Salò shows.
Or than Climax shows. We've seen like homosexuals thrown from building, women stoned. There was this gay activist who was just kind of lynched to death with blows to his stomach, in fact, to his whole body, by a mob in Athens just the other day, right? That's available, to see. There's been images, so actually nothing that these films are showing you is in fact worse than what you see in news. I was going to say newsreel footage, but that's probably not the appropriate word anymore. But YouTube footage or media footage of it. Yeah. You've seen it visualized, but there is something about the power of cinema, about being in the dark and actually kind of seeing with other people, that I think it has a particular force. I mean, this felt very strong.
And having it kind of presented and structured for you and played for you. If that's what it could be a documentary as well.
And playing you with it.
Yeah. Like, so it's not quite as simple as we see worse things like this. Obviously when you see something kind of that horrific and it's real footage from real life, then it is awful. But the idea of it being built for you for a different purpose on screen, for entertainment amongst other things perhaps, that is powerful, and that's not something that news footage can convey.
No,
because it's not for entertainment. Well, I mean, the argument over whether it's entertainment or not, that's another one, but it's not entertainment in the same way, at least.
Yes.
Whether you kind of get a visceral thrill out of it, that's a different question.
Yes, I mean, your emotions and your response is almost kind of being incited or elicited, in some ways choreographed by someone, right? And so they have kind of ethical and moral responsibilities toward that process, and I'm not sure that Gaspar Noé knows what the boundaries are upon occasion. I'm very glad we saw the film, and I do find it interesting, and I think actually it's kind of, it'll be one of those films that'll give us a lot to think about. I never find Gaspar Noé's films enjoyable, ever. I always find them excruciating to watch. Right. They're physically excruciating to watch. They're painful for me to watch. And then what happens is that I find they do kind of enrich and enhance my thinking, about cinema in general, and kind of in other ideas, but I've never found them pleasurable. They're extremely unpleasurable.
Have you seen Love?
No.
Which was 2015, I think?
No.
So I haven't seen that one, and that is the one that he was supposed to be making. I think that was in 3D. And it was supposed to be like erotic, beautiful. I haven't seen that one. So like that's the kind of one where it's like the absolute opposite of what you might expect.
Okay, well, I think big
it's on
gap
Netflix.
then for me.
Exactly, and for me as well. I think it's on Netflix. So
I don't think I can watch this type of film on TV or on Netflix, because I would have turned it off after they spiked the sangria.
But Love might be.
Yes.
Love might be a film you can stick with. And that's the one I'm saying is on Netflix, I think.
Like there was this whole thing about Pauline Kael only watching a film once and whatever. Because I think, and to me, that philosophy made sense for then, in a way. Because, like, kind of, most viewers, you only saw the film once, right? And kind of, and so, a whole film was designed and built around the experience of people watching the film once, right? But actually, that's no longer true. I think filmmakers make films nowadays with the idea that it is on digital, it is on DVD, it is that you'll be able to look at it back and forth and kind of look at particular scenes over and over again and so on, right? So I think for me, kind of a first viewing is always exploratory in a sense, like kind of, and I can't blame this film for not making
itself clear
to
making those
me
links for you
immediately. Yes, because I think we have a different way of viewing now. So but all I can say at this moment is that I couldn't put it together. It just didn't register for me in a way that I could make sense of it. Though I understood that there is a sense to be made of it. Right now, I actually don't want to watch it again to find out. Which is the other. It's the other thing that I think, maybe filmmakers don't pay enough attention to. So yes, you can watch it 5 times and get a different sense of it. But will you want to?
Yeah, I suppose there's an element of that. Although it's only an hour and a half long.
Yes, I know.
It feels longer. I think.
I didn't feel. I must say.
It doesn't feel like excruciatingly long.
I didn't find it felt long to me.
Right.
And I was riveted throughout.
I was going to say, like, for all the kind of negativity I think we've expressed in some regards, I had a really good time.
Yeah.
Kind of advisedly speaking, like it wasn't like a laugh riot, but I really enjoyed the experience of being in the cinema watching it. It's like, there's very few films that like envelop you the way that this film will.
Yes, it did.
Just the pounding music, and it's constant, and the lighting and the camera and the way it's just always moving and always showing something, always following someone. There's always something interesting to look at.
It's a film that expands your horizons in a way. It asks you to view and listen differently, and to pay attention to different things, and to put things together kind of in a different way. It keeps you on your toes, and I like that. I think too few films do that, now. So it's just...
Well, I suppose in a sense for me it feels like a small project.
Yes.
A little bit like 127 Hours in a way, where it was like, there's this story of this guy who got caught between a boulder and a cliff for 127 hours, and he had to cut his arm off. Like, what kind of film could you make out of that?
Yes.
It's kind of the idea, and I feel there's something similar in this. The idea that it's based on true events. It says to me, like, Gaspar Noé heard about this story and was like, "There's a film in here."
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's not quite enough of a film in here.
Yeah.
At least on first viewing, though, but it is a cinematic experience, and it's like it would be diminished on home systems.
I mean, I wish we'd watched it on an even better screen than the Electric offers, actually.
Yeah. Although it was good, though. I thought it was fine.
Well, I thought that there might have been more to the visual qualities that we weren't able to get from that kind of projector. It's not a very good projector.
Well, we can see it again in a month or two at the Mac. And I might do, to be honest. Like, I think it'd be a shame to miss it, really, when it's only half an hour.
Well, maybe I'll take you up on it. I mean,
you only get one chance to see it again, really. It's not going to come back, is it?
No, but
and it's got a nice fancy projector there that we like.
Yes, we do very much.
So
I actually found it a really stimulating and interesting experience. Yeah, and actually, I do think that we haven't scratched the surface of it. So all we can describe is, this experience of first viewing of a film that seems to be doing kind of really interesting things and is very playful kind of formally, and goes into quite dark places that I felt were not quite justified, actually.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think the idea that you raised of the racial and ethnic makeup of the group being central, I think that's right, that it is central, and there is a point being made of it. And the idea that the point being made of it is that social cohesion is not possible, it's not a true point to make, because I think, like, in any circumstances, if it was a group of all black people, a group of all white people, a group of all Chinese people, if someone spiked the sangria and it's causing everyone to have a bad trip, then, like, any group is going to start going crazy over it. I don't like the idea that, like, it would be tied to the way that France practices kind of social cohesion is not a good one.
Yes, but there might be other things. For example, I mean, I do think that there is this thing about children, and I also think, like, what was the whole incest thing, and what is it doing there?
Yeah. So the thing about kind of family and parentage is, it's not just about the mother and her son who she locks away, but there's also the protective thing where the brother is very protective of his sister who's 5 years younger, and I could sort of tell quite early on that it's more than that. There's going to be something dark. There's an attraction there rather than just a kind of protectiveness. Although it's kind of slightly played for laughs the first time you see it, but it becomes darker. And there's the thing of the DJ and the young gay guy calling him daddy.
Yes.
Everyone calls him daddy, but he particularly calls him daddy, and they have there is a kind of paternal relationship
between them,
but again they sleep together, or you see them having had.
Though at some point, you see them in bed together hugging, because actually there's this bit of dialogue with the DJ where he says, you might lose your virginity today.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and then like the morning after, when you kind of pick up on the various people and you see where they are, those two are in bed together.
Yes.
Asleep.
But you don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's not clear.
But there is something
but you have seen the brother and the sister having sex, or
you do,
or rather him having sex with her.
Yes.
That I don't know how much she is part of it. I don't quite remember.
Yeah.
I think she was kind of. It's suggested to me that she is reciprocating.
Oh, I didn't get that feeling at all.
Not the scene where they're on the floor, but the scene where they're in the kind of one of the rooms and they're on the side. Like, she seems to be into it then.
Yeah.
They're walked in on by the other guy.
Yeah, I know. I didn't get. I got the feeling she was doing it.
Right.
But whether she was into doing it, I didn't.
Sure. Okay.
I didn't get. There's a distinction there. Anyway, I just kind of.
It feels like darkness for darkness' sake.
Yes, it feels like, one of those American Gothic, Southern Gothic things, where there's just like kind of too many variances in the stew, really. I don't get it. I mean, I think, there's things you want to say about people or countries or communities. You don't have to put in a whole array of suicides and incest and murder and, hitting pregnant women in stomachs. I mean, really, like...
Well, I agree. I mean, I get your point, but I suppose it just comes back to that thing of, like, if the project is to turn this club into hell for one night, everything is going to be in there. Like, he's not a guy who... No way this is not a guy who sort of will let an idea drop if he thinks it's dirty.
That's true.
What about the portrayal of gay people? I mean, it's not an accident. There seems to be a project of a lot of these people in this collective are gay or bisexual or up for experimentation.
Yes. I mean, I didn't feel anything about it really. So I thought the gay boys were quite sweet. The young one. And then the big DJ, who's like very fat and flaunting it and dancing. I thought that was all really nice. The lesbian stuff, I thought was maybe less successful. So,
well, it's exhausting, isn't it? It's really exhausting, and it's only 90 minutes long.
So, well, kind of let's leave it here and maybe come back again when it plays to the max. So, overall impression on first viewing.
It's definitely worth seeing. It's mad. It's a little bit like Do the Right Thing crossed with Mother. Crossed
with Mother, crossed with the Exterminating Angel.
Crossed with the Irreversible as well.
Yes.
It's
that area.
It's a stew of sort of darknesses and madnesses and there's a kind of, in a way, like seeing it is like a joyful release of darkness. You get to go into the cinema and see all this mad stuff happening, and then you get to go home and be clean.
I want to say though, I agree with Mike, but I just want to add how riveting it is. So for example, Mike told off this guy after we came out of the screening for having had his phone on for the last 5 minutes of the film, and I didn't even notice. I was like so enraptured, just by what was happening on screen. I mean, I did turn away. I always do. Like, there were moments of violence where I turn, like, I just can't see. So I do those things where you're looking with put your hands to your face and your fingers
look
are
through your fingers.
Open. Yeah, but it's like woo. But nonetheless, I really was riveted. What the film is doing is keeps your interest at all times, and it also has kind of moments of humor and levity. It's not all darkness, but it becomes dark. Like, the more it proceeds, the darker it gets. But there's always something kind of really interesting going on that makes you wonder if you're getting it, and at the end of the film, I suppose my particular answer is not quite,
Yeah, not yet.
Or not yet. Yes.
I just think that I might not have had a go at that guy if the film hadn't worked me up.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I was thinking about telling you off in the film, and as we were saying after, like, it's you want to, but also you're not sure if you're going to ruin it for other people. The cinema was very full.
Yes.
And clearly the film was kind of reaching its climax, and you thought, this guy's already ruining it for people. Am I going to be adding to that if I make noise?
Yes.
You know. So I didn't do it at the time, but after the screening, we followed them out, and I was telling you, that's the bloke, and you said, what bloke? Because you didn't notice.
Yes.
And I was like, oh fuck it, I'm going to tell him, and I told him off. And I was damn right to as well.
Macho Mike.
He even denied knowledge of it. I said, you were just in Climax, right? And he said, yeah, with a smile on his face because he thought I was being friendly. And
little did he know, the Hulk was about to come out.
And then I said, turn your phone off, yeah? I said, phone's off. And he said, what? And I said, your phone was on. And he said, no, it wasn't. I said, right at the end, but in the Climax, it was on. And he said, yeah, it was on for like 5 minutes. And I was like, oh, great, 5 minutes. The rest was trying to watch a fucking movie.
Yes.
I said to him. And I said, phone's off, yeah? I said, turn it off. And then I walked off. And he said, you turn it off. All right. Great.
Anyway.
The other thing I'll say is I made a film like this once.
Did you?
Not as good as this, probably, but a lot shorter. And it's on YouTube.
Ah, what's it called? And where could they access it?
It's called The End, which means you'll never be able to find it. But I might put a link to it in the description.
Okay.
It was actually, I mean, to be honest, the film that I made was basically copying Irreversible. Or, well, no, it was inspired by Irreversible.
Okay. Without the...
It wasn't as dirty as Irreversible.
And it didn't have the fire extinguisher.
No fire extinguisher. Very. Actually, there is a death in it. But it's with the lid of a toilet, lid of a cistern, rather than a fire extinguisher.
All right. So if you want to see Mike's Dada experiment,
I'll put a link to it in the description. Yeah.
All right. So. Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it for now. But I'm keen to see it again, and I think we should do.
Okay. So,
and we've got enough time to let our stomach settle because it's a couple of months before it's out again.
Yeah.
Or a month and a half.
Right. Okay. Good. So, thank you very much for listening to the first installment of a discussion of Climax, and actually, the films that we do. So we have this policy of really reading nothing and going into the film blind. And then kind of just discussing the experience of it. But by the time that we do a second viewing, I actually do like to kind of read criticism and be informed and so on. You'll if you come back, you'll come back to a much more kind of thoughtful and better informed discussion.
Yeah, and I think kind of competing interpretations of this film would be particularly informative. Like, this film, I think, would open up to different people in different ways.
Yes.
And if you've seen it and have thoughts, then we'd love to hear them because there's so much to dig into in here. It'll be really interesting to hear what you think. And also, I think we could probably stand to watch Love before then. Because it is available, yes, and we've not seen it. You have seen Irreversible, and I know you've seen Irreversible.
I've seen Into the Void. I've seen Irreversible, and I've seen something else actually.
Those are his big ones. I don't remember what
else.
Carne was mid-90s.
I saw that.
I Stand Alone as well. I Stand Alone, Irreversible, Enter the Void, Love, and Climax.
Right. Okay.
Seul contre tous.
Seul contre tous. Yes. So we'll see Love in the meantime as well. So thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we're everywhere.
We're on Facebook, and Twitter, iTunes and SoundCloud and YouTube, and eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Excellent.
You can find us at all those places.
All right. Goodbye.
Cheerio, folks.